Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 29 of That Gives Me Anxiety. I'm Patrick Jones, and I'm in Colorado. Well, not right now. I'm recording this before I actually leave, but I'm doing that because I'll be in Colorado, in Denver. I've actually never been to anywhere in mountain time, which is very exciting to... I mean, not that the time zone is exciting. But it's exciting to go to a state I've never been, city I've never been. Actually going to Denver to see a show at Red Rocks, which is like a bucket list venue for me. So very excited to check it out. We actually bought tickets for this before the pandemic. So like I'm about to use the ticket that I bought in 2019. Wild to think. They just have kept pushing it back. The band is Lord Huron. Actually, I don't know them too well, but it doesn't matter. I would go see Kids Bop live in concert at Red Rocks and have a good time. Or try to. I mean, Kids Bop might be pushing it. It's also exciting to be able to travel again, check out new places. I'm actually going to be arriving a day early because I couldn't get a direct flight from Charleston to Denver. So I'm going to have half a day in Denver to myself. Check out some art museums, walk around. It'd be great. Nothing to do, just hanging out, going wherever I feel like. But in order to do that, I needed to record early. So it's Sunday, Memorial Day weekend. Beautiful day out here in Charleston. And I'm recording the intro to this podcast. I mean, that is dedication. I have a great episode lined up here. It's the full interview on caves with Anmar Mirza. The episode got a pretty large response, so I wanted to release the full episode so that I'm able to share all of the stories. I mean, Anmar goes into some detail about searching for criminals in caves and searching for meth labs. I mean, that's the type of content that everybody wants, right? I'm just doing a public service by getting it out there. But before we talk about criminals and caves, just want to remind you that if you're liking the show, to please remember, rate and review it. You can check the show out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, or YouTube. And if you're liking the show and you want to support it and support me, you can do that using the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description wherever you're listening. That's just a way to make a donation to the show, and that would be greatly appreciated. So yeah, let's make our way to Anmar from the formerly of the Cave Rescue Commission. As always, thank you so much for listening, and enjoy. Joining me on the podcast now is Anmar Mirza. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Great. So excited to have you. You've held many titles as you were just explaining to me, but you're an expert in cave rescues. Such an interesting field. Well, thank you so much for your time here.
Sure.
Why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about yourself and your background in cave rescues?
Okay. Well, professionally, I'm an assistant director of risk management at Indiana University. I also teach an emergency medical technician class. I started caving when I was 13. I've caved in Bloomington, Indiana to start with. And when you cave in Bloomington, Indiana, especially in the early 80s through the 90s, you got involved in a lot of rescues because we actually had, on average, about one a month for many, many years.
Oh, wow.
And so I went on my first actual cave rescue when I was 14 years old. So I've been on about 150 real rescues in that time period since I first started caving. And that kind of naturally led me into a lot of things. It's why I'm an emergency medical technician and now an instructor for EMT. I became involved with the National Cave Rescue Commission, taking classes and helping out teaching seminars within the central region, the area around where I live. I then became an instructor with the National Cave Rescue Commission, and then eventually became the central region coordinator. I did that for about 10 years. And was the national coordinator for the NCRC for 12 years. And I just recently accepted the position of the Central Region Coordinator of the newly developed Vertical Training Commission that the NSS, the National Speleological Society, is putting out.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And just for fun, I also wear a few other hats as well. I'm the property manager for the NSS Richard Blends Nature Preserve, which has Buckner Cave on it. And I'm typically caving a couple of times a week, and I'm involved with a couple of different project caves, the primary which is the James Cave Project down in Kentucky, which is the second longest running cave project in the U.S.
Very cool. What was it
that brought you to a cave the first time? Just because that was the town and it was there, or what interested you to go caving?
Yeah, well, Southern Indiana has a lot of caves. We've got about 4,000 or so caves in just it's all the caves are the southern part of the state,
Huh.
with a very few small exceptions. And so we have a very high cave density. The county that I live in actually has 400 plus caves in it. But I actually went into my very first cave, I was 8 or 9 years old, and it was on a school trip. But then, of course, living in a caving area, our schools would take trips to tourist caves and the like.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was 13 in my 8th grade class, our science teacher took us to Buckner Cave, the cave I'm now the property manager for. And I had a carbide light, I had a helmet and all the proper caving equipment, and had a good time with it. Hooked up with at the time it was called the IU Spelunking Club. This would have been in the early 80s. And started caving regularly, and then eventually became the one of the presidents of the IU Spelunking Club and a vice president. And I just held a lot of positions within that, and have just thoroughly enjoyed it the entire time I've done it.
Very cool.
So let me get this straight. In today's day and age, you're supposed to be drinking a ton of water, doing yoga, making sure you and your whole family is happy, strike a good work-life balance, exercise, read books, watch movies, eat healthy meals, be a big part of your community, and get 8 hours of sleep. It's unrealistic. It's too much. Well, that's why there's Instacart to take a little bit off your plate, or help put a little bit on your plate. I'm so sorry. Using Instacart, you search for all your favorite foods and items that you need from the grocery store, fresh produce, all your favorites, everything you want, and they deliver it to you. They go to the store and do your shopping for you. Just remove it from your to-do list, just with a few clicks. And you'll have your items delivered to your door in as fast as an hour. It's pretty quick. And through the link in the episode description, they're offering free delivery on your first order over $35. But you got to make sure you click the link in the description. That tells Instacart that this show sent you, and it helps support the show. And you can also take advantage of the free delivery. So yeah, be nice to yourself. Give Instacart a shot.
Do you know how these caves form?
Sure. Cave development I'm an amateur geologist, and of course, specializing in caves, but I like geology in general. But there's actually caves in just about every imaginable type of environment you can picture. Most caves in the world form in limestone, and it's the action of slightly acidic water that dissolves the limestone. Limestone is a soluble rock. It dissolves out the natural joints and cavities and fissures in the rock. But you can get caves in lots of other types. You can get lava tube caves where lava flows and the outside of the lava solidifies and the inside just flows on out. There's hundreds and hundreds of lava tube caves like that. You can get caves in ice. Some friends of mine are actually mapping caves, like glacier caves up on like Mount St. Helens and Mount Hood and places like that. You can get caves in just tumble down fault block rocks off the edges of mountains, or sea caves. So they happen just about everywhere. You can even get caves just in dirt itself. We call those soil pipes. And as you can imagine, they're actually kind of dangerous because they're fairly unstable.
Yeah, I would imagine. I'm just so surprised when I picture a cave. I mean, I'm from Long Island, and I've been to a few tourist caves, but don't have too much experience. I pictured that they would be closer to mountain ranges and not everywhere as they, I guess they are.
Yeah, actually, some of the longest cave systems in the world are under relatively flat areas. There are some that are associated with the mountains, and some of the deepest caves in the world are associated with the mountains. But the longest cave system in the world, Mammoth Cave and Mammoth Cave National Park in Kentucky, it's over 425 miles now, I think.
Wow.
We're adding mileage to it all the time. The highest and lowest elevations in that area are only about 400-foot vertical difference.
Wow, that's crazy. That's like from New York to Boston.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And it's all under an area that's probably about 5 miles by about 8 miles rectangle.
Wow, that's crazy. Oh my gosh. You did mention that you've been on a lot of rescues. So I'm curious, what are people being rescued from? What are the dangers when entering a cave?
So that's an excellent question. A lot of people have this perception, if they're not cavers, they have this perception that caves are just dangerous places. And they can be. And that's the key thing to remember, is that they can be. For the unprepared, It's not a forgiving environment. If you trip and fall out on a sidewalk in Long Island where you are, you whip out your cell phone, you dial 911, 5 minutes later, an ambulance has picked you up, 10 minutes later, you're in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Well, cell phones don't work in caves and for the most part. So somebody has to go out, they have to get help, they have to come and get you out and extricate you out, carry you out. And so it can be hours and hours and hours. And so you might, if you're going to die from a trauma injury, your highest chance of survival is in that first hour from when the trauma happens to when you get to definitive care. That doesn't happen in most caves. But the biggest thing that happens to people in caves is getting lost.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it used to be getting lost and out of light. But actually, since I started caving, lighting technology has changed so much that we actually rarely find people who are out of light anymore, because LED lights and the batteries that they're, even the cheap ones, are lasting, hundreds of hours in many cases. And I kind of have this joke that if I ever get trapped in a cave somewhere, they're going to find my desiccated corpse with my light still running. But it didn't used to be that way. And in the early days of caving, after people stopped using candles and torches and the like, but they were using miner's lamps, you could only carry 10 or 20 hours at the most worth of light, and your light needed constant care. So we've gone from lost and out of light to lost. And for the most part, that's probably about 90%. And yes, a lot of statistics are just kind of estimates, but I've done enough rescues that I can actually say that's a pretty close estimate, that, especially the rescues I've done, but most people get lost. Now, that getting lost can then result in other problems, but it oftentimes starts with getting lost. And the simple solution to that is to, first off, never cave alone. There's our basic caving rules here. Always make sure you have adequate light. And then one of the most important ones that you can do is let somebody know where you're going and when you expect to be back out. And so if you're overdue, then they'll hopefully call people who know the cave and they can come and look for you. One of the most dangerous things that you can do is to go caving by yourself and don't tell anybody where you're going, and not in known caves. So if you're, just happen to know of a cave on a neighbor's farm and you decide to go off and explore it yourself and you don't show up, nobody knows where you are. And like in my county, there's 400 caves. We cannot physically search every single cave in the county in a reasonable time frame.
Right. Yeah. What would you recommend? I mean, you mentioned light and talking to someone. Is there something like a checklist of things that people should have on them to cave safely?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and that kind of leads me to just a little advertisement for the National Speleological Society. It's the nation's caving organization, caves.org, pretty easy to remember.
Yeah.
They have on there what we call the Guide to Responsible Caving. And it's got that checklist of everything you need to know when you start caving. But the basics, adequate light sources, letting somebody know where you're going, when you expect to be back, not caving alone, having a helmet or other proper equipment, rugged clothing, gloves, boots. The other really important thing is to know what the cave does in weather. And if you don't know what the cave does in weather, don't go in. So a lot of caves, and probably the majority of caves, are either formed by or still actively have water in them. And so they will respond to weather events. And so getting trapped or killed by rising water in the cave can be a very real risk. And probably a substantial percentage of the people who die in caves die because of flooding events. So that is one of the there are caves that I go into all the time. I'll go into regardless of what the weather's doing, because I know they're perfectly safe. Water will not go into those places in the caves that I'm going to go into. But I know that about those caves. If it's a cave I don't know, I won't go in if it's going to be a substantial risk of flooding.
And that substantial risk is like a big rainstorm is coming through, or
sure.
Something like
well,
that.
It can be a rainstorm. It can also be, we've got a lot of snow on the ground and the weather's going to warm up today really quickly, and all that snow's going to be melting. Or you get a rain event when there's snow on the ground and the ground's frozen. Now you can have, a half an inch of rain can now suddenly turn into several inches of equivalent of rain. So a cave that might not flood in the summertime, if we get a half an inch of rain, in the winter when there's 6 inches of snow on the ground, may flood substantially.
Oh, wow. That's a good reminder. I mean, I didn't know that was possible. I feel so lost. Normally in these interviews, I have some concept of I'm doing like public speaking or flying, but I'm learning all about these things. So it's great things to know about.
Look who we got here. It's our friends at My Software Tutor. Can Excel be my friend? Many people have wondered this for years. The answer is yes, it can. Excel doesn't have to be like the friend that your mom makes you hang out with in elementary school. It's weird. It's always stuff with boogers, right? What's wrong? What's up? Why is that kid always eating boogers? Their house always had the best snacks, too. And there he is. Boogers. Well, Excel doesn't have to be like that weird kid. Unless you were that weird kid. Were you? Be honest. You know. I'm not actually asking. I can't hear your response, but you know. And it's okay if you were. You know, just take it easy with the boogers. Just talking about boogers to get ad read. Don't worry. They didn't write that part. That was an improvisation. My Software Tutor offers 3 levels of real-time Zoom-based courses with a live instructor. They deliver practical, functional business skills in a friendly and supportive environment. It can be daunting, right? You need that supporting environment to learn Excel. There's no stupid questions. It could be really difficult. And as we know, when we talk about it on this podcast all the time, it could be really daunting to learn something new and put yourself out there. So think of this as like a kindergarten for learning something new and helping your job prospects. Or be better at the job you already have. Get that raise, get that whatever, take pictures of it for Instagram. Yeah, that'll be cool. Keeping it as vague as possible so that you can input your own. Just making a mad lib of your own desires. These courses will increase your marketability, whether you're an employee, job seeker, consultant, or contractor. Register at mysoftwaretutor.com and use the promo code POD20 to save 20% off all registrations. Thank you so much to My Software Tutor. Yeah, guys, take advantage of that 20% off and confidently list Excel on your resume.
One thing that I feel like I've heard, or is maybe it's more related to the forest, but I feel like I've been taught if you're lost, stay where you are. Does that hold water in if I was to be lost in a cave?
So we have something in cave rescue we call answer number 1. Answer number 1 means that it depends on the situation.
Okay.
We get asked a lot of questions. Sometimes we don't have a good answer for you. In general, yes, if you're lost in a cave, stay where you are. And there are some caves where that absolutely would be the best advice you can give. In other caves, that may not be the best advice. However, again, if you know little enough about caving, that's probably your safest course of action. Mm-hmm. Now, me, if I'm lost, chances are pretty good that staying stationary is not going to be my best course of action, because as an experienced caver, I may get to a point where I recognize something within the cave, or I know enough ways to route find in the cave to find the way out.
Okay.
So it really, really depends. Your average person who's never been caving before, if they were to get lost in the cave, yes, probably stay stationary. Now, I spend a lot of time outside in the woods. If I'm lost in the woods, it's the same deal. If I can't quickly find my way to the proper route, my best course of action is to stay stationary, because that's the highest probability searchers of finding me. So again, it's not as hard and fast as being out in the woods, but for the novice, it's still pretty good advice.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's good to know. Another thing I feel people are nervous about is that they're going to encounter some kind of a bat, a bear. I mean, how likely do you think that is for someone going into a cave?
So the most dangerous thing you're going to encounter in most caves, as far as other creatures go, are other people. Bats live in lots and lots of different caves. Bats are cavers' mascots. Matter of fact, our sticker is a little yellow and black sticker with bats on it.
Nice.
So cavers love bats. We very strongly protect them. For the most part, bats are going to be completely harmless for you. I have been in situations in caves where the evening bat flight was either leaving or returning, and 500,000 bats were coming through a very small passage I was in.
Oh my
God! Lay down on the
Yeah.
ground, watched 500,000 bats fly overhead for about 20 minutes, and they were fine. Yeah. Now, bats do carry certain diseases, and the most common reason people in the United States will get rabies is from a bat bite. About 70% of all rabies cases originate from bat bites. However, bats aren't just going to fly onto you and bite you. They don't do that. They're going to do their best to avoid you. most people who get bit by bats, they get bit because they had one, say, in their bedroom at night, and it landed on them, they rolled over, and then the bat bit defensively.
Oh, wow.
And the problem with bat bites is that their teeth are really tiny. You may not even know you've been bitten. And so you get bit by a wild animal, you go, oh, I might need to go get a rabies shot. Get bit by a bat, you didn't even know it. But in caves, I've spent a substantial portion of my life in caves, and including having handled bats along with bat biologists and the like. And as long as you're not disturbing them, they're not going to bite you. They don't get tangled in your hair or anything like that, like kind of the common misconceptions. I have, however, been in very small crawlways face to face with a raccoon that was trying to go the direction I was going, and I was trying to go in, they were trying to go out, and we both went the other direction. You don't want to ever corner a wild animal. I've been in a small crawlway near an entrance, a cave that had vultures that had nested in the cave. And vultures are very, very aggressive at defending their territory, and their defense is to actually vomit on you. And vulture vomit is incredibly acidic. Luckily, I didn't get puked on by a vulture, but I've heard of it happening to cavers. Near entrances of caves, you might, especially in summertime, you might have snakes like copperheads or rattlesnakes that are taking shelter in that area. But for the most part, if you're being relatively careful, the critters in the caves are not that big of a problem. Our area in Indiana, we don't have bears. Bears did used to den in caves in the wintertime in Indiana, and they still do in some states. But again, those are pretty rare. I actually, believe it or not, I did just actually read about a rescue from some dogs in the cave. I want to say it was in Tennessee. I'm blanking on exactly where it was, where the dogs chased a bear into the cave, and they were down a pit. The rescuers actually had to go in past the bear to get to the dogs. But
wow.
It all turned out okay. And again, for the most part, other people are going to be the most dangerous things you encounter in caves. I've been called to go into caves after fugitives, as well as people who had suspected meth labs in caves.
Oh my gosh. We should talk about that if you're able to and would like to. So a fugitive went into a cave, and was there one way in and one way out?
So in this particular case, it turned out not to be the fugitive. We had somebody who had been quite literally camping in the cave without permission, but at the same time, we had somebody who just a couple miles away had shot his father and was the fugitive from justice. And so we had thought he might be in that particular cave because we'd had a report of somebody in the cave by another group that had been exiting. We've also had people who have threatened suicide, saying, the next time you see me, I'll be dead. Don't come looking for me. I'll take you out with me. That kind of thing. In that particular case, I was actually pretty sure they were hiding in the woods nearby the cave. Law enforcement came and with their canine units and tracked them to outside the cave. The two times I've gone into caves looking for drug labs at the request of the sheriff, both times there was not actually a person in the cave, but there could have been. So these are the situations that as somebody who's involved with rescue that we get asked to do occasionally.
Yeah, there was also that pretty famous one of the soccer team. I forget what country, but it was in Asia. Thailand. There you go. And is that a case? I don't know how familiar you are with it, but is that a case where the water, like a rainstorm, had caught them? Going back to what you were saying before.
So I actually was the point person for the U.S., the National Speleological Society's media response. For the Thai rescue. So I ended up doing about 140 interviews for that rescue. In that particular case, and as well, I was also helping coordinate some of the U.S. response to that as part of the job as the national coordinator for the national rescue. But in that particular case, it's a rarer situation in the U.S., but there are places that it does occur in the U.S. where caves will seasonally flood. And in this particular case, the beginning of the monsoon season caused the cave to flood while they were in the cave, and it basically wasn't going to go down for many, many months. We do have a few caves in the U.S. where that is also the case. There's a cave out in Arizona that when the groundwater comes up seasonally, it blocks the passage, and they have to wait until the summer for the groundwater to go down enough for them to enter in the cave. And it's one of the longest systems where you can be from an entrance to the back of the cave in the United States. It's about 12 and a half miles from the entrance to the far back of the cave. There's more mileage in the cave, but you have to get to the farthest ends. You have to traverse that. But as you can imagine, if somebody was back in there and they were in a safe location, they wouldn't be able to get out. We did have a rescue in Kentucky, I want to say about 35 years ago now, where some people got flooded into the cave, and they ended up using mining pumps to pump the water down, got the people out, and when they let it go back up again, it was about 3 months before the water came down enough for people to go in and out of the cave again.
Oh, wow. That's so much
That's,
water.
that's pretty rare, though. I would say only a very small percentage of caves that most people go into have that kind of a problem.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Hey, do you wish you were a thoughtful card person but don't have the time or energy? Right? You want to be that person that has a hobby, full-time job, crushing it in the job, has kids, has a family, has a dog, whatever it is, and still, right, sends that message, sends a card, handwritten, something that makes you laugh and cry. How does that person do it? I don't know. But maybe it's Cardist. Maybe he's born with it. Maybe it's Cardist. The Carta Studio is your personal assistant. That's how you get it done, right? Somebody helps you out with it. That's okay. The end result is still the end result. You're thinking, oh, should I send them a card? That's it. From there, you just jump onto thecartastudio.com and tell them exactly what just popped in your head. Your thoughtfulness. The Carta Studio will get your personalized message handwritten into the card and in the mail for you. You're busy. You're doing a lot of other things. You know, it's not like they're going to tell on you. And the person's going to be thrilled. I've gotten one of these, and it filled my heart with joy. Even better, it's fast, it's custom, and it's a total life changer. Hey, you're a thoughtful card person now. Look at you. New achievement unlocked. Just go to thecartastudio.com, and you can even use the promo code AnxietyPod for 10% off all orders.
Well, it seems like you should have a pretty good understanding of what characteristics a cave has before you enter it. What kind of background do you think you should have on a cave? Like how well should you know where you're going?
So a lot of that really is, and another excellent question. A lot of that really depends on your level of experience. So the kind of caves that I go into to do the exploration, novices absolutely should not be going into. If you follow the safe caving rules, and you get some education. Caving is actually an incredibly safe activity. It's about 1/10 of the risk on a per person hour basis of just about everything else that you can do. I mean, playing baseball is more risky than going caving. Mm-hmm. But there are caves in every area that are commonly traveled. We sort of jokingly call them the Boy Scout caves because all the Boy Scout groups and the church groups and all that go to these caves. These are the caves that there's very low risk in the caves. Buckner, the cave that I manage, is one of those caves. It's not a flooding danger in most of the cave. There's only one very small part of the cave that can potentially flood, and very few people ever even go to that area, and you're not going to get trapped in that area. The other thing that makes Buckner relatively safe is there's not any large drops in it. It's not like you're going to fall down a 200-foot pit inadvertently or get trapped in a really tight little crevice. Another thing that makes Buckner relatively safe, and a lot of these well-traveled caves safe, is that because they're well-traveled, unstable areas in the cave have been stabilized. So most caves are geological features. They've been there for anywhere from tens of thousands to several million years. And that rock that may have been precariously balanced there for the last 500,000 years, somebody comes along and brushes against it and it falls. Well, in a cave like Buckner, that's already happened. So not to say that it can't happen, but it's incredibly unlikely. Caves are actually very safe from that standpoint because they are temperature stable, so they don't have the freeze-thawing cycling like you're going to get out in cliffs and out on mountains. Mm-hmm. I was actually just in the Grand Canyon a couple of weeks ago, and we actually watched a really major rock slide happen on the valley wall, beside, not next to us, but across the valley from us. In the tens of thousands of hours I've spent caving, I've seen rocks spontaneously fall twice. Mm. So, and that's, again, pretty rare. And it's even pretty rare for people to disturb rocks that will hurt or kill them. It does happen, and especially in lesser traveled caves. Mm. But for your average person, getting back to your original question there, for your average person, they should know, is this cave one that is relatively traveled? What does the cave do in the weather? What do the people who go caving in this area think of this cave?
Mhm.
So if I were giving a novice advice, I would tell them this is not something you should go in without somebody who's experienced, who knows that cave.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds like great advice. And you kind of touched on this. It it seems like a forest that you were going to go on a hike. A lot of these caves kind of have trails, in a sense that have been commonly walked about.
Yeah. So something I teach new cavers and people who listen to this podcast who've started caving with me will chuckle at this because it's kind of become a famous quote. But caves are three-dimensional and caves are full of optical illusions.
Mm,
So caves out in the forest, you're looking right and left.
mhm,
In a cave, you're looking right, left, up, and down.
mm,
And a cave, when you're looking the other direction, looks totally different than when you're looking this direction. So you go in, we teach people to always look back when they change whatever they're doing. If they go from a crawlway to a room or vice versa, turn around and look back and see what they came from. Most caves that have a lot of traffic in them will have pretty well established trails in them. That can actually be confusing though, because everybody goes down this dead end passage that seems like the way out, but it's not the way out. But that's where the obvious trail is because everybody goes down that passage.
mhm.
And for people who vandalize the cave by leaving graffiti like arrows or the like, so that's not something we do in caving, is there will oftentimes in these well-traveled caves, there'll be arrows pointing both directions down the same passage and they'll both say out just because hundreds of different people have left them. So we teach people when they're navigating in caves, if you absolutely have to leave a navigation aid, you leave something that can be picked up on the way out, such as flagging tape or a siloom stick. And that way you're not marking on the cave walls.
Great. Yeah, that is good advice. I was going to ask something like that, like you could leave like a string or something, but yeah, definitely don't want to damage anything.
String is one of those funny things that I always get chuckled with. String is actually one of the worst things that you can do for caves because it's very difficult to carry enough string because
Mhm.
you're often going half a mile or a mile or more into a cave. And in Buckner, there have been a few times I've actually, because we clean a lot of garbage out of the cave from
Mhm.
the thoughtless visitors, we will see some string in the cave, we start balling it up, and then I'll encounter a group and here's your ball of string here.
Oh.
So yeah, we don't recommend leaving string or any kind of permanent marker. Caves, for the most part, there are a few very, very mazy caves that it can be difficult to navigate in. But for the most part, most caves aren't that difficult. There may be one or two passages. Buckner is 3.5 miles of passage, and it's kind of complex. Your listeners can go to bucknercave.org and see a map of our cave. But even with that complexity, there's a limit to how lost you're going to get.
Mhm.
So we don't tend to recommend people go in caving blind, but if you follow the basic rules of look back when you come to a change in the passage, and if you're going into a cave, go in with somebody who knows the cave, and
Yeah.
then you can learn how to route find. If you have to go in by yourself, make sure that you go in a little ways, learn that route, and then come back some other time you go a little bit farther.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, why not go with someone who knows the cave? Just make it easy.
You'll have a better time. They'll show you all the neat stuff.
That's true. That's a great point. Have you ever been, is it called spelunking? Where it's like really small? Am I saying that right?
So the word spelunking it's a pejorative term in caving. It has its origins, and 40, 50, 60 years ago, you had heard it commonly called spelunking. But the caving community got away from that because that was what the popular media picked up on. So anytime you'd hear a news article, it's like these spelunkers. And for a while, there was this reputation that the spelunkers were the partiers and the people that cavers had to go rescue.
Okay.
We've tried to get away from that. I mean, honestly, anybody who goes into a cave to appreciate caving, whether they do it once a year and they don't know a whole lot about the caving community, or they're active hardcore cavers, we all still enjoy caves. But within the community, spelunking is still a pejorative term.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that for me. Yeah. Are you okay with being in a tight space in a cave, or is that something that has caused you specifically anxiety?
So I'm like many cavers. Tight spaces don't bother me to the degree they probably do other people. I was not trying to exaggerate or make it sound really macho or whatever, but I was describing a trip that I went on to a outdoor sports writer who was also ex-special forces. And as I was describing this trip to him, and the fact that at one point I was kind of head down in this really tight place and kind of stuck in there and was having a great time, I'm looking at this guy just getting white as a sheet. And he stopped me right there and said, I've been in combat and firefights and nothing has scared me more than what you've been telling me.
Oh gosh.
So, and again, I'm not trying to be macho. To me, that's the environment that I'm comfortable in.
Yeah.
I've been in tight passages where I'm chest to back on rock and I can only draw half a breath, and I'm okay with that. Now, I have been in passages with water in it where the water was coming up and I've only got this much airspace and water's coming up and up and up. And my lips are against the ceiling. And yes, I was scared.
Yeah.
But
what did you do? Did you have to breathe?
In that particular situation, it turned out that as I was in such a small passage, I was filling the passage completely. And it started out with about that much water, but I was pushing the water ahead of me. And I didn't realize it. Once I figured that out, I just kind of lifted myself up.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it was for a few moments there was pretty tense.
Yeah.
But I do know longtime active cavers who have been in really difficult tight situations who've had that freak out moment. And all of a sudden it's just like, I need to get out right now. It's never happened to me from that standpoint. There have been a few times where I'm sitting there going, okay, calm down, breathe, relax, work the problem. But it's never been that panic situation. I have, however, taken a lot of new people caving. And sometimes I have to talk people through things. And I mean, there are people who will not go back to certain areas just because they did not like how tight it was. I have spent 3 days, we were exploring and mapping a section of cave where we were camped in the cave. I spent 3 days in a passage that was no taller than about that high, so about 1.5 feet high by about 3 or 4 feet wide. And we spent 3 days, and that was the largest area of the cave we were in.
Oh gosh.
So
I couldn't do that.
Yeah, going to the bathroom is the real challenge there.
I can only imagine. That's exactly what my brain went.
Really, your listeners do not want the graphic details on there.
Yeah.
but yes,
go.
Yeah. But it is the range. I mean, and cavers the caving tends to attract people who are okay with tight places.
Of course, yeah. Well, it's a good reminder. You said work the problem to, a lot of times with anxiety, you're letting the runaway train take over as opposed to bringing yourself back into the present and just grounding yourself and going from there as opposed to just giving into something that's not going to help you in the situation. So I'm glad that that hasn't happened to you too much. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I just want to double check. Is there anything I'm missing? Is there anything else you want to say about a particular rescue or how to cave safely? Or you've talked about it a few times, just how safe caving actually is?
Yeah. So one thing that we didn't actually touch on is something we call vertical caving.
Okay.
So not all caves are horizontal. Some caves are vertical and some caves are a combination thereof. One of the things that a lot of people tend to think, oh, I've been rock climbing, or I've been canyoneering, or I learned how to rappel in the military. And vertical caving is actually a whole different discipline. And while there is some similarities and there's some crossover with equipment, it's actually the most common problems we have with vertical caving are people who learned their techniques in some other field. And then tried to apply that to vertical caving, because there's some assumptions that you can make that can get you hurt or killed. But the other thing that I want to talk about is the community. And this is something that a lot of people, and it really started with adventure sports, I want to say back in the 90s, where people, they wanted to collect everything. They were going to go parachuting and rock climbing and canyoneering and caving and ice diving or whatever. I mean, all of these things where they wanted to experience these things and then be known to have experienced them, because that, for whatever reason, that was part of their self-identity. But the people who do caving as a more serious activity, even, I mean, when I say serious, I don't mean they go caving every week. They could be going caving once a year, but they get involved with the community. And the community is actually one of the biggest portions of caving. Within the caving community, you have just an incredible amount of resources and friends and people that and you get involved in a lot more of the details, not just going in a cave, but we have week-long conventions. We have our cave rescue trainings that we do, which are just an awful lot of fun. And within the caving community, within rescue, one of the things that I'm always very proud to say is that we are, by and large, the only activity that rescues itself. So if you go out fishing and you get in trouble, Coast Guard or the Department of Natural Resources, they may perform the rescue. If you go mountaineering, you may have the sheriff's department or a specialized rescue team that comes and gets you. And there are specialized cave rescue teams across the country, but they typically are staffed by volunteers who are people who are part of the caving community. So every time I've done a rescue here in Indiana, we have the Department of Natural Resources who has a small cave rescue team, but they don't have enough resources to pull out a substantial rescue. And so 90% of the people who are there will be volunteer cavers out of the community, because we are the people who are capable of getting to those locations that we like to go into. And so, and quite frankly, if I got injured in a cave somewhere, there's maybe 50 people across the entire country who may be able to get to where I am. And certainly the local fire department folks, they do a great job with fires and car accidents and things like that, but they don't train for cave rescue.
Right.
And they shouldn't, because you've got X number of budget dollars to put into training, put into the things you do all the time versus the things that are actually pretty rare. So within the United States, on average, only 3 to 4 people die a year in caves. It's again, pretty safe.
Yeah, that's really low. Wow. Well, how can people get a hold of you? Are you active on any social media or any websites you think people should have?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm part of a lot of them. Honestly, anybody who does the web search on my name and caving, you're going to come up with thousands of hits. For many years, I actually owned the first page of Google because of my public figure within caving and cave rescue. But the caves.org, the NSS website, is probably the single point best place to get information. And I'm linked in there in a number of different ways. I'm also, as part of the Richard Blend's Nature Conservancy, which manages Buckner Cave, I'm involved with that. So again, pretty public with that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I think you've convinced me to go caving. Do you know of any caves around? I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. Do you know of any caves that are in this area?
So you are in actually kind of a caving poor environment, but there are cavers in your area. One of our NCRC instructors is not too far away from you in that area. I won't on the podcast, I won't give his name off, but if you want to go offline, I can give you a hookup with him.
Well, cool. Yeah, I definitely want to give it a shot, and you definitely have calmed my anxiety about doing it, because I like hearing how safe activities are, and I also, it's so nice to know what you should have and what you should know before doing it. That, when you know what you could do to help yourself, it just helps make everything a bit easier and less scary.
So one final thing there that I don't think we touched on during this, but why go caving? Okay, so for some people it's adventure, for some people it's sport. For me, it's pretty much everything. And I go caving in Buckner once a week to manage the cave, but also to keep in shape for the harder caving I do. But in caving, I have been the first person to ever see something that no one has ever seen before, ever. And there are not many places on planet Earth that you can do that. The first set of eyes, I've taken a camera, put it around a corner on a passage that's totally virgin, nobody's ever been in it, taken a picture before human eyes have ever seen that area. I've seen some of the most incredibly delicately decorated cave passages in the world. And I've been to places that in the entire time the cave will exist, maybe fewer than a dozen people will ever have seen it. So that to me is just an absolutely fascinating aspect of it. And even among the caving community, even among the well-traveled caves, and like Buckner, we estimate that something on the order of 750,000 people have been through Buckner over the last 50 or 60 years that it's been open for general visitation. That's still over 50 or 60 years. That's like a 1/100% of the population that have seen that cave. So it's a unique feature. I mean, I just came back from hiking in the Grand Canyon, and millions of people a year see the Grand Canyon. I've been in places where, I may be the only person who's ever been there.
That's so cool. Yeah. Just like people like going to the beach or going to the forest to kind of shed modern stresses and their job and stuff. Caving is just another way of doing that.
Yep. And when you're in a cave, you're not bothered by this.
Yeah, that's true.
Cell phones do not work in the cave. We actually teach some of our rescue classes entirely in cave, and there's absolutely no distraction.
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, anytime you can get a break from your phone, life is a little bit better.
Yep.
Thank you so much for your time, and I'll let you know when this is ready to go out.
All right. Good to meet you.
So as you're listening to this, the chances are I'll be in the air flying back. Right, the flight home from travel is just on the way there. You're excited. There's promise. You don't know what's gonna happen. It's exciting. On the way home, it's just like, get me home. Oh, my trip is over. So that's how I'll be feeling as you're listening to this. I know. Pity me for being able to travel right now. Oh, we feel so awful for you, Pat. Oh, God. All right, you're right. Yeah, stop my complaining. I just had a fun few days. Well, I guess it's also the fact that I'm flying back and right back into finishing packing for a move. Moving is never good. But still, exciting to have our own house. I want to remind everyone about my other podcast called Death Space Filling the Void. You can check it out wherever you download your podcasts or deathspacepodcast.com. I'm just realizing I forgot to say thank you to Anmar. Thank you so much, Anmar. That was so much fun to talk to you, and thanks for your time. If you're liking the show, please remember there is the Buy Me a Coffee link. It's a way to donate to the show, and that would be greatly appreciated. Also, you can click the link and sign up for an Instacart account. By doing it that way, you're telling Instacart that this show sent you, which also helps support the show. Then there's the My Software Tutor link with the promo code POD20, which gives you 20% off. I think I'm being too loud for Ollie. He's searching for a new place to lay. I'm just bugging him with my loud banter. There's also the Carta, which gives you 10% off with the promo code AnxietyPod. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you on Thursday. I'll be living in my new house oh my gosh. That's crazy to think.